All right, we're live. So, welcome to Substack Live. I'm Joel Salinas. This is Leadership and Change. And today, the topic is the value of content. I know something which feels almost like a trick question in 2026. AI can now produce an infinite amount of content from basically nothing. Um, so, is what's worth anything anymore? And I've got the right person to ask. I have Michael Schreiber, spent years inside the rooms that set the standard for this. New York Times, HBO, ABC, NBC. You'll hear a lot from him. He's an Emmy winner, DuPont winner. Then he went and built MediaFeed, which it's a real content operation. So he's been on the content on many different sides. And I'm just excited, Michael, to get your thoughts on a lot of these pieces. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and be part of this community. It's great.
Yeah. So MediaFeed is common. I feel like a lot of us know it, but how did you get to where you are? So maybe a few minutes on how did you get to being the CEO of
Yeah,
MediaFeed and all the other fun things that you also do.
sure. The backstory. Well, the short version of the backstory, we can probably dive deeper into some of this stuff later, is that I started as a journalist, initially in newspapers, and then got into documentaries, long form documentaries. And I did one documentary about the credit card industry that turned me into a financial journalist accidentally. And then I started working for a few different financial publications, one of which was thestreet.com. And I learned about content syndication back then. And we would syndicate stories to like the Yahoos and MSNs of the world. And back then, this was a while ago. If you got your story on the homepage of Yahoo or something, they could send you like 20 million people over the course of a couple days. And so, yeah, it was big. It was the fire hose of traffic, and we were all trying to figure out how to game that system. And I ended up getting hired away. This was when the transition kind of happened. I got hired away by a fintech company called Credit.com, and they were the first company in the States to really give free credit scores to people. And because I had
Huh.
done this documentary about the credit card industry, I knew something about how credit worked and educating people about credit. And our job at credit.com was to develop a true editorial operation that was doing essentially personal finance content aimed at credit, how it all works, so that we could get those distribution deals
Mhm.
and get our stuff syndicated out there. Because we initially wanted that fire hose of traffic, which happened every once in a while, but we learned pretty quickly that it was actually more meaningful in terms of organic traffic and SEO. Like if you were smart about what kind of content you were creating and doing it in the proper way,
Mhm.
and then being smart about getting it syndicated and linking back to these important articles, you could really drive very high intent organic traffic back to pages on your site that people were more likely to engage with because you were
Mhm.
answering their questions, you understood their needs. And so that did really well. And eventually credit.com sold. And I was like, I think I can do this on my own and not just in finance, but do it across different verticals. And so that was really the idea that MediaFeed was born out of that. We create some of our own content and we syndicate it.
Mhm.
But we help different types of organizations, and it can be a brand, it can be a nonprofit, it can be an individual journalist or any permutation really, and help them figure out what their expertise should be in the context of journalism. Like,
Mhm.
what is your editorial product? We help them either create that product or maybe they're already creating it and then we help them
Huh.
refine it. And then we help them syndicate it. And we're one way to syndicate content. There are a lot of platforms that can syndicate content. We're one of them, but we think of ourselves more of a full service kind of shop in the sense that we help you develop your overall approach to journalism, which doesn't come naturally necessarily to
Yeah.
every business, right? And not every business necessarily should be doing it, or it's not really a priority to do it, and it's very different from performance marketing, for example, which
Mhm.
businesses are more likely to be aware of. So we get into it with folks and we help them develop this kind of work, and yeah, that's the idea of media feed.
So you've seen content come across your desk from all different places, all different industries, finance. It's really interesting to when I look at your your resume, you went through New York Times, through Frontline, NBC, and you also there's also some fun stuff in Media Feed that you
Yeah,
work
yeah.
with. It's not all serious stuff. So,
Yeah.
what when you look at content and you look at, okay, this content is meaningful. How do you decide that? How do you decide, hey, this is something that is going to resonate?
Well, there are different types of content for different purposes, and it's easy
Mhm.
enough to think of it in terms of a content funnel. At the very top of the
Yeah.
funnel, the broadest appeal stuff are gonna be those fun pieces, the lists, the little known facts and stuff from history, and you won't believe this or that, the worst movies from 1973. All of the stuff that we see, and we create some of that stuff, and that stuff still gets a lot of eyeballs
Yeah.
because people love to procrastinate and and need something to look at when they're not doing their work or what have you. And so that's one way to do that. And there are ways to kind of do that and lead somebody down a more intent-driven path.
Mhm.
But when you think about the bottom of the funnel, it's something very specific. Like I go back to the credit example. If somebody is doing a search for, what is a good credit score if I am applying for my first mortgage in St. Louis, let's say, let's get
Mhm.
really specific. If somebody's doing that search, you have a pretty good idea, probably 50% or more what this person is interested in. Maybe not now, but at some point in their
Mhm.
life. So their intent is quite high. So if you can create content that's designed to answer that question and you become a trusted resource for them on that issue and other related issues, then if you are a person or an organization that is selling products or services related to that kind of inquiry, then they're more likely
Mhm.
to transact with you. It's not brain surgery, right? Like this is just like we are experts in
Supply
this
and
subject.
demand.
Yeah, we are
Yeah.
experts in this subject. We are going to shoot straight with you and give you information in an objective way that is not designed to sell. That's the important part that doesn't come naturally to everybody is that when you're creating real editorial content, you
Mhm.
have to resist the temptation to sell directly in that piece the way you see in maybe sponsored content or
Yeah.
traditional kind of PR oriented content. That's not what we're doing here. And the reality is that because the media business is so fragmented right now,
Mhm.
and traditional media is struggling so much, businesses in different shapes and sizes are coming in to fill the void, and the rules of the road aren't always clear to them. So, we're a team of journalists. We've been doing this for a long time. And so that we see that as part of our role is to help folks understand what's okay and what's not in terms of creating this
Yeah.
content.
That's awesome. And you've talked about seeing the intent, and it's not just sponsored content or just trying to bait people into doing certain things. So at the bottom layer, there's a level of trust.
Hmm.
And you're at serious journalism like NBC created pieces or New York Times, also media feed and
Hmm.
getting all types of content and seeing how that goes out to people. And on your own, you also have your own local podcast, which is
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's so cool. Three different levels, all different, but I feel like you have a perspective that most of us will never have. It's well rounded. What does building trust look like in 2026 with content?
I mean, I think it's transparency and honesty, which is, the same, you know.
Hmm.
So it's always been that, and that I think there is, people are smart. They know, they can if you've got something to sell, they can figure it out. And if your sales mission is in some way, shape, or form informing your content, meaning like I have to write about it in this way because it could
Hmm.
undermine my ability to transact in this other way. People are smart enough to figure that out and will undermine your brand ultimately, I think. And it also probably won't help your sales, is the other
Yeah.
problem. Hold on, guys. Sorry, my screen went dark for a second. I think, like, I remember, I was working with some folks at one point, and we started creating content that showed people how to do on their own the thing that their service provided. And it's very counterintuitive. Like, why would you tell people how to do this thing that we're selling? I mean,
Mhm.
and the reality is like most people didn't want to do it. Like, and if you could explain to them like the complexities of this work in an honest way, uh, a certain percentage of them might end up doing it on their own, but a much larger percent is gonna be like, "You know what? That sounds nuts. I'm not gonna do that. I'd rather just pay you to do it." And so there is some logic to that, to full transparency, to becoming the Encyclopedia Britannica of whatever it is that you do, and teaching people. I mean, you can teach people how to fish. They're still gonna want you to go fishing for them sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. Now, l- you built trust across so many different areas. You came from a small local newspaper, started writing in college. You built up. Now you're CEO, chief editor of this large corporation, and you decided to start your own local podcast. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I live in a town in New Jersey called, Montclair, and it's kind of a media town. It's right outside of New York City, and I happen to live here. I've lived here for, about 17 years, and one of my old friends from journalism school, she moved here with her family, like, right before COVID. And we just hang out a lot. Like my kid babysits her kids, and like our families are together a lot. And we would always just talk about how this is a perfect town for a podcast. And we both started in local news. She started at
Huh,
New One. If there are any New Yorkers here, you remember New York One, and so she can do it all. Her name is Farnoosh Torabi, and she's got a very successful podcast called So Money. She's a financial journalist also. And so eventually we decided, you know what, to hell with it. We're going to do this. We felt that podcasting was an excellent medium for local journalism. We also feel like local journalism needs a business model that is sustainable. There are a
mhm,
lot of strong local media organizations. Some of them are nonprofits. There's a good nonprofit newspaper in our town. We really felt strongly, though, that in order for local journalism to survive and thrive, there needs to be a business model that is really
yeah,
sustainable, and that where individuals can say, you know what, I can make a nice living doing this. I don't necessarily need to make tens of millions of dollars, but I can serve my community in a way that is impactful, that helps people, and that can provide for myself and my family. And that's really been our goal. And so we decided, we both have our own companies. We decided, like crazy people, we're going to start another company. And now we work all the time, basically. I like 2 hours ago, I was recording the show, and we broadcast an hour long show every Thursday, and it's people listen to it on their way to work or what have
that's
you,
awesome.
and get their updates around town. And it's a bit of personality. You become trusted sources, but we also have a website. We also have an Instagram. We have a lot of outlets. The podcast is really the main one, and we can use that content to create articles, to create Instagram reels, to do all sorts of stuff because of what we're doing right now is the format, right? Like
Mhm.
this platform of Substack Live is very similar to the platform we record on, and we're able to output the transcripts and really leverage all of that material to create um, content across different platforms. It's the flywheel metaphor that everybody uses, but it really is true.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. There's there's what I call lazy AI use. You just have
Yep.
AI do thinking for you. Then there's strategic AI use. You're talking a lot about how you're able to have this reach as many people as it can, and
Yep.
it needs to be valuable, and it needs to lead to enough profit and revenue to make it a sustainable business.
Hmm.
If you are spending 12 hours repurposing that to articles and going through the transcripts manually, it probably wouldn't be feasible. So, where does AI fit inside media?
Yeah, I mean, like there's a few ways. Like if we take the podcast as an example, we use these recording tools um, to capture our interviews with
Mhm.
for the host read interviews, as well as when I interview somebody, they're just sitting there. It's like a Zoom, basically, right? And the AI is immediately able to clean up the
Mm.
track, right? Removing the ums, and I can go through it. And if somebody flubs a word, you can actually use the AI to correct the word, right? There's all sorts of things that you can do to clean stuff up, to minimize the amounts of edits you have to do manually, and just to create a clean track of what it is you want to do. So there's huge efficiencies in terms of AI, just in terms of production. The same can be said for written content. Like, let's say you have a huge document, right? And you don't necessarily have time to read 180 pages
Mhm.
of something, like of a town budget. Like, you go in, you give the AI the budget, you say, please highlight X, Y, and Z for me. Then this is
Yeah.
very important. You go back and check to make sure it doesn't mess up, because it does all the time mess it up. And so you still need to put your eyes on it, but it is a great first step in terms of identifying stuff. And that's not to say that the AI won't necessarily miss stuff. I mean, it will, but so will you if you're
Mhm.
reading a document that's 180 pages long.
Yeah.
And nothing is perfect in this world. So it is essentially a workflow optimizer, right? So that's one way to do it. And then it's just like, how can you leverage these tools to create media across platforms? Well, like,
Mhm.
the same can be said for taking a transcript from this, and we'll do it with this, right?
Yeah.
We'll take this
Yeah, it's
transcript.
that's part of my workflow. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, let me turn it, let me start interviewing you now. How will you take this transcript and turn it into an article? What's your process for doing that?
Yeah, my process is I have a skill built within Claude already. So drop the article into Claude. It already knows exactly what I want, and it's going to pull in I the format that podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify have, where you have the timestamps.
Yeah.
What are you talking about on each timestamp? It's going to say, okay, we're talking about local podcast at
Yeah.
minute 2:33, and somebody could just click on it. And then
Yeah.
the top takeaways, what I have mine do is it'll ask me a few questions on what stood out the most to me, and then
Hmm.
it's gonna use that to take out the main topics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
So it's like the
all that is
overview
done
document.
automatically. What is it?
You're making it for the overview document, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, like, that's one way to do it. Like, we also have, like, so let's say, I have a writer whose first language isn't English. He's a better writer than me, but he still wants the AI to look at it to make sure there are no grammatical issues
Yeah.
that he can then go back. So there are things like that. Grammarly does that too, obviously. There are any number of tools for that. But I think, what you don't wanna do is just be like, "Hey, AI, write me an article about XYZ," without
Yeah.
providing any original data or information or perspective. That's where you get into the issue of, like, a tidal wave of slop, which is what we see now, which is what's I do think probably the search engines are getting smarter about seeing content that isn't properly, resourced,
Mhm.
as opposed just stuff that's kind of made up, like, that's not based on any unique information, because it all looks like the same ones and zeros in the end as everything else. So I think having something original and unique that is your own, whether it's taken from a transcript from a conversation, or in case of some companies, it's like they might be sitting on a treasure trove of
Yeah.
original data and analytics that they've been collecting for years. Like, that's something that not everybody's going to have. So how can you leverage that to turn it into really good, engaging, and unique content?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the key. It How can you use AI to leverage and amplify what you're already doing?
Hmm.
Not have it replace.
Yeah.
And
It's a force multiplier, as they say, right?
exactly. Exactly. And I love to hear that AI is getting smarter about that. It's similar to what you saw in Google. I mean, Google for a long time, it was just random stuff would come up,
Yeah.
and in the first page, they started cleaning that up. They started seeing, okay, if this is linked out from a university or a medical journal. It has more than if it's just coming from Reddit. You're
Yeah.
coming from you're syndicating articles. Media feed is all the time looking at what's going to resonate, what's going to be
Yeah, yeah.
seen, what's going to get eyes, what's going to build trust. So, what have you seen as the evolution of content as you've been looking at posts submitted to media feed over the
Well,
last few years?
there's 2 things, like, the stuff that's gonna pop on these platforms,
Mhm.
is still gonna be the stuff that just gets the clicks, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's the same kinda candy that everybody has been clicking on for years and years and years. That's still what gets eyeballs at the top of the funnel. It's not the most engaging content. It's not gonna lead necessarily to a transaction. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe there are cases when there are affiliate models that can work for that, but it's really like, and you've seen the CPMs on content like this go down over the course of the years, right?
Mhm.
But then there's like the kind of content where the intent is higher and the audience is lower. And maybe those kinds of articles aren't getting a ton of views in syndication. And that's not really the point. The point is to make sure that this kind of valuable content is getting broad distribution, and it goes out with a canonical tag. I should note, this is a bit techie, but like a canonical tag identifies who the original publisher is, right?
Mhm.
So MediaFeed aggregates creates some of its own content, and the canonical tag is to MediaFeed. But
Mhm.
we're also aggregating content from, let's say, Leadership and Change, which we are, right? So
Mhm.
that canonical tag is going to point to your Substack where you originally posted the content,
Mhm.
right? So when we syndicate it, it goes out with that canonical tag, and that is a signal to both the search engines and the AIs that MediaFeed isn't the one that created this, but you're the one that created this. And if you are smart about what you're syndicating and what you're linking to from your syndicated stories, you start to create signals over time that you should be known for X, Y, or Z subject. That is really the point of syndication. And not that you're going to somehow capture, like I was talking about in the old days, how I wanted the 20 million people to
Yeah.
hit me with the referral traffic. It's a nice to have. It's entirely unpredictable. And it's not really the point of syndication. It's kind of gravy. The point of syndication and content distribution in general is to create organic awareness. And that's organic in the true sense. Just more people know that you exist and what you do. And organic for the robots. These robots understand
Yeah.
who you are and what you do so that they can surface your content, whether it's an AI overview, which is increasingly the case, which again has lower clicks but higher intent, right? If you see an AI overview, it answers your question most of the way, you're good, you're not going to click. But if
Mhm.
you do click over to a source, then you know that that
It's high
person
intent.
really, really high
Yeah.
intent, right? So how that math shakes out in the end, we will see over the course of the coming years.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be tighter for a while, but I
Mhm.
think for the people that really learn how to capture those eyeballs, they will have a powerful new channel acquisition.
Yeah. And we got a question here from Farida. So, how do you balance the need for what people are looking for versus what algorithms are looking for? The algorithms change. I mean, one of the reasons that I have a
Yeah.
hard time with LinkedIn is because I I want to create content. I'm not necessarily interested in playing the game of I need to make these many comments and these many likes in order for my content to be seen. And how does that balance happening?
I mean, I think the primary purpose is your primary role is to create the content that your target audience needs. I mean,
Mhm.
that is where you start. Okay, who am I trying to get in touch with? What are the questions that they have? I am going to create content that answers those questions. Like, that's what it's always been, right? And then, like, how do I optimize that content to make sure it gets seen
Mhm.
on different platforms? And the platforms are going to be changing over time. The algorithms that surface content on those platforms are going to change over time. So you've got to be kind of nimble. But if your North Star is always making sure that you are focused on answering your target audience's questions or engaging with them. Maybe it's not
Mhm.
questions, maybe you're entertaining them, maybe who
Yeah.
knows? Like then the algorithms will have to keep up with you as opposed to the other way around. That's really what the algorithms are trying to do, right? They want to make sure that they are finding you if you are doing this thing that we're talking about.
Mhm. Yeah. That's so interesting. And do you think people are getting changing what they look for in content? Or do you think the same
Always, I mean.
buzzwords are the same? So if an article that says robots are going to kill us all in 5 years, here are my 10 ways to avoid getting killed. Just hyperbole and exaggeration. Do you think that still resonates the way it always has, or do you think there's been an evolution in reader understanding?
I mean, always, people are, my kid engages with content in a vastly different way than I do. And the audiences on MSN and AOL and Newsbreak, they are all different from one another, and Yahoo. They are all
Mhm.
different from one another. They are different from the people engaging on Apple News and Google News, perhaps, and they're different from the people engaging on TikTok and Instagram. So, yeah, I mean, like, I will say that in some cases, you're making, like, these strategic decisions. Like, it's nice that I'm syndicating content and on AOL, let's say, and I'm engaging with a specific demographic there. But more importantly, just syndicating to these kind of platforms that really curate good real journalism is a signal to the AIs and the search engines of the world that you are legit. And so that's like a means to an end as opposed
Mhm.
to really 100% focusing on that audience. Not that we're doing both. I mean, we are doing both. Our content resonates with these
Mhm.
audiences, and we can see that in the views. But it doesn't all have to be one thing. I hope that helps to answer that
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So as I you've talked about audience a lot, and I see a lot of creators just try to be everything to everybody, and they end up not being anything to anybody.
I get it.
You're kind of lukewarm across the board. So you built audiences for decades across different industries, different interests. I mean, all the way
Mhm.
from those who want to learn more about credit cards to local podcasts. So what's the difference between content that builds a following, that builds an audience versus content that just fills feeds? Because today
Yeah.
you can, I mean, one prompt, you can generate a 3,000 word article every 5 minutes and just post.
Yeah. I mean, it's ultimately it's people having some level of trust. Like when we were doing credit.com, right? Like we had a group of like really smart credit professionals that knew the world of credit. And so when people asked questions, they were getting answers. For the podcast from real people, I should say. For
Yeah.
the podcast, it's the same thing. People ask us questions like and even though we don't always know the answers to everything, they know that we are of this community and we are telling them honestly. And so I think that there's a part of that that has to be part of the calculus when you are creating content is what is your special sauce, your special perspective that makes you trustworthy in this area, in a transparent way, and in a way that people that is attractive to people. That's the other thing. Like
Mhm.
so, all of those things.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. There are a lot of creators who are gonna read this, watch this live. I'm talking to CEOs. I was coaching a CEO a few weeks ago, and we were actually talking about how he could use AI to create content because
Hmm.
even though he runs a clinic, he wants to know how can I use AI to write content because I want to get my thought leadership out and I want to build my audience. So everybody's now creating content.
Hmm.
If you were advising a writer, somebody who's wanting to say, "Hey, I want to syndicate my content. I want to reach everywhere." What is one thing that you would tell them to stop doing that most people do? So, a common misconception or something that people miss most commonly.
Um, I mean, I wouldn't presume. First of all, to tell anybody what to do. We're all figuring it out,
Yeah.
right? But I will say something that I've learned in the past year. So, since starting this podcast, I write the first draft of most episodes, typically, and I think and at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, I can use AI for this." Like, and I would outline it, and I would be like, "All right, here's what the show's gonna be about," and I would give it some samples of my writing and say, "Oh, you can learn how I write." And I tried it, and Farnoosh was like, "This is shit, pardon my French. You're a good writer. What the hell are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And so I stopped and I started writing again. And
Uh,
so what I would say to anybody is like who is trying to figure this stuff out. A, it's a process that never ends. And B, write. Like actually make it
mm,
come out of you to
yeah,
begin with. And then look for ways to kind of and then look for efficiencies and finding ways to take this actual thing that you've created and turn it into as many things as possible. But it's starting with a kind
mhm,
of core of authenticity, I would say, So that's kind of where I come out with this. And I don't
yeah,
know if that would work for the person that you referenced, if that would apply, but I think without getting too specific, everybody should start there.
mhm, yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of what my format is like. For summarizing these kind of conversations, there's a lot more
Mhm.
AI involved on my end. But for my articles that go out Mondays, Thursdays, I write them out, and then English is also my second language. So
Mhm.
I bring in AI. Okay, let's look for is there any repetitiveness here? Am I saying something that I've already said before that doesn't need to be said again? Am I rambling over here or going on a tangent that is not making sense? And
Mhm.
AI is impressively good at that.
Yeah.
But it does start with me. It does start with yeah.
Uh, Although I got a comment from a client recently where we had done that. We had used an AI to scrub something to make sure there was no repetition or like there were no grammatical errors, and it was like a final proofread or something. And
Mhm,
I don't think this was like necessarily. It wasn't like the AI changed the language, but it like the end product uh lacked kind of, I'm trying to remember the word that she used, but the idea was it lacked personality, I think.
hmm,
And like, I think this is something that's not just an AI problem that can happen anytime you are writing for a client or writing as a service provider, is that you kind of like gravitate towards the mean, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Let's make it as palatable for everyone.
yeah.
And
I
you're
don't wanna
skipping
offend
steps.
here, and I don't wanna jump too far on this
I
side.
know. Exactly, but what ends up you're skipping the step of learning that person's voice, right?
Yeah,
Like, and so that becomes an important part of it, and that's when I realized, I was like, "Oh, we need to take a step back and really
mm,
understand how this client really wants us to sound like them and really internalize that." And that's something that AI is just learning how to do. And
mhm.
I'm sure it'll get better at that. But it's not a person. It doesn't have empathy the same way that we do. And so just remember that. That will always be our superpower.
Yeah.
So
And I think what you're doing is the biggest piece of advice here. Try the tool. Try using it. See what works, what doesn't. You're gonna have to sometimes go a little further. Sometimes you're gonna have to pull back. I've had
mm,
to pull back multiple times. There was one time when I needed to get something out. I was just running out of time, and I did exactly that. I said, okay, here's a few paragraphs on dictated, kind of what's in my mind. Just turn that into, you know, a brief article for me that I can get out, and I read over it. There's no way I could put it out. It was just it was bland.
good
No
for you.
flavor, no
Good for catching it.
yeah.
A lot of
It
people, like, we're all busy these days, right? Like, so
But going back to trust, it's one time that you break trust can undo 10
yeah,
years of building it.
can be really huge, right?
Yeah.
You know? And hopefully, like, your ability to be transparent with people and to some extent and if you do screw up or, something gets out there, be honest about it, you know, talk
Mhm.
talk through what happened. Most of the time, people will relate to that because we've all done this, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say that you shouldn't be vigilant and learn from these things. We obviously should, but, yeah.
But there's an AI driven credibility failure almost daily now. so and so used
I
stats that
mean,
were made up. I mean,
my
lawyers and cases.
there's some crazy like, sometimes I'll give it a transcript and say, pull the quote or something, and it will, like, take the quotes and fabricate from the quotes, and I'm like, "Why are you doing this?" And that gets to the whole point of it. They don't have empathy. It's not like
Yeah,
it understands
yeah,
that I want to be transparent and honest and, like, report accurately. It's just like,
yeah,
"Oh, let me find the most efficient way to do this thing," and it cuts corners, and that's also the
yeah.
other thing, like, you have to remember, like, we've got this amazing energy crunch happening right now, and the way
Mhm.
that materializes as these AIs evolve is it figures out which queries to cut corners on and which it can't. And I'm sure you guys have noticed this,
Yeah,
right? Where you like query it in a certain way and it's just like you clearly did not like go through each and every step. Like you made certain assumptions, the
yeah,
AI did, I mean. And as a result, like you got a incorrect or very impartial answer. And you're like, oh, this is because it didn't want to spend the money on the energy, probably because in order to answer the question more fully to use the highest level. It wasn't using the highest level of the
yeah.
LLM,
It's just
right?
trying to
Like
be efficient. It's trying to
it's
cut
trying to be
corners.
efficient, and it's like not Lieutenant Commander Data from all the Star Wars, not Star Wars, Star Trek Next Generation fans out.
And at the same time, I think that that's where the need for human expertise comes in because
Yeah,
it you have to know how to write. You have to know if it's a medical journal. You have
yeah,
to understand it to be able to catch those things. Because if you don't, you're just you're no better than
yeah.
an automatic clicker that's just pressing send.
It will never be as funny as you either.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So what? Without exposing any company secrets, when you look at the next 5 years, following the trajectory that we're doing,
Mhm.
what what is MediaFeed seeing on the horizon? Or are you doing anything different? Or is it just, no, people are people.
I
We're going to
I
focus on
see the
trust.
continued I think what we have seen over the past 10 years and continuing to this day is the continued fragmentation of the media business. So really what the internet did was make it so anybody could distribute content, right? It
Yeah.
used to be that you needed satellites and printing presses and all of these kind of blockers that made it impossible for an individual to
Hmm.
broadcast their words or voice or what have you, right? And so starting
Yeah.
with the internet, it became possible for anybody to get there was no barrier to distribution. So and we have seen this slowly but surely happen where you have more media organizations, right? Like starting with more and more cable channels and then more and more websites and different types of news organizations. And all of these smaller ones taking market share away from the bigger
Hmm.
ones, right? And it continues on to this day with more and more companies now doing that. And you see more and more journalists going and working for different companies and
Yeah.
businesses, right? Creating, and sometimes it really works well because the companies get what journalism is, and sometimes it doesn't work really well because the companies want, essentially to expand their PR team and masquerade it as news, right? But ultimately, like, what is happening is just more and more media is coming from more and more different places. I think that will continue. I think MediaFeed will continue to do that work, but I think on the local news side, we are gonna my goal is to make it possible for individuals to have sustainable business models
Hmm.
for local journalism. I think it is, like, absolutely vital for our democracy.
Yeah.
And it's good for humanity in general, for like people to inform their neighbors and communities about what's going on in a way that they don't have to just ask people for donations. I think
Hmm.
because that's going to be the first thing that dies when the economy contracts, which is inevitable, right? So we want to make this sustainable, and I think it goes for local communities. It goes for individual creators. I think you're going to start to see more individuals create shows like TV shows that they just release. Like, and in fact, like Louis C.K. before he was canceled started like releasing his shows directly on his website, and they actually did quite well, and some of them were really excellent shows. And I think you're going to start to see more and more folks doing that, and possibly coming out of New Jersey. New Jersey is interesting right now in the States because there are all these tax incentives that the local government here in the state did to encourage more studios to move here. So we're seeing like this
Hmm.
huge kind of boom of media in New Jersey right now. Like next, Netflix built a big studio here. You got like I think Amazon built one. There's another one. So several big studios uh, have opened operations here. But you're also going to start seeing more and more, I think, lone practitioners, small shops like me and Farnooja's doing stuff like this, which I
Yeah.
think is really good. And I think the more we can have this kind of, especially in the world of local news, sustainable content, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the playing field has been leveled for people. You no longer need as much access as you needed before.
Yeah.
That's why I'm on Substack. I love the platform and what it allows you. You have readers. I interact with readers from all over the world, almost daily.
That's
Comments from
amazing.
India, Nigeria, Argentina,
Yeah.
and a lot of the US, and that I would not be doing this 20 years ago
Yeah,
because,
yeah, it wouldn't be
you know,
possible.
it wouldn't be
These niche
possible.
audiences, I've talked a lot, over the years, about this, for MediaFeed, the idea of having, like, 5,000 people that are really devoted to you and really engage with you is worth more than, like, 5,000,000 people that,
Right.
like, maybe give you a passing glance,
Yeah.
and that's proven at the local level, certainly with the Montclair Pod, my podcast. That's absolutely true. But I also think it's true in terms of subject matter. Like you can create a
Mhm.
community, and we see this on subreddits. There are all sorts of ways on Substacks as well, where it's a very specific subject, and it's a very devoted audience. And the
Oh,
question
yeah.
is like, how do you monetize that audience? That's still, something that we're all working towards. With local media, it's easier because I can go into the store up
Mhm.
the block from me and say, "Hey, I have this audience and they live and shop. They live
Yeah.
here and they shop at your place." And it's pretty easy. And it's no longer a conversation about CPMs because they know who we are. And so that's what we're trying to figure out in other ways, I think, for other verticals too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's constantly evolving. It At the same time, it's also giving more opportunity for innovation and
Yeah.
for adapting to new ways. So I'm excited to see what Media Feed and what your podcasts are going to keep doing. I'll be following. If people want to find you, what's the best place to find you?
And just go to you can MediaFeed has the content site at mediafeed.co. That's where you'll see all of our content. And there's kind of a work with us page there too. We have a separate corporate site at mediafeed.us. You can also check out the Montclair Pod on montclairpod.com and all of the streaming services. I know most of you guys aren't from Montclair, but maybe you want to learn about this small New Jersey town, right? Um, so yeah, you can find me there
That's
and find
awesome.
me on LinkedIn. Like I'm on LinkedIn. We'll put all those links in the
Yeah.
show notes or in the
Yeah.
in
All
the
the links are going to be in
article.
the post. We're going to give my last question is to finish off. What is one or two books that you would recommend?
Oh God, man. You should have told me you were gonna ask me for books. Um, I would say, there was a book that I read by Ernest Becker back when I was in college,
Hmm.
and it's called Denial of Death, and so all right. You asked the question, so
Yeah,
now I have to answer it, dude.
I love it.
All right. So Ernest Becker was this cultural anthropologist. He's gone. He's long dead now, but he made this observation that humans are like animals in that we have an innate instinct towards self-preservation. Like we avoid harm, we avoid pain and death instinctively. But unlike animals, we are conscious and we are aware of our own mortality, right? So that creates a paradox. Why are we not freaked out all the time? Because on the one hand, like everything within us says, don't die and don't get hurt. On the other hand, we're smart enough to know that at some point we're definitely dying. So basically, Becker's
Huh,
entire
that's interesting.
theory is that things like cultural worldviews, self-esteem, all of these things are constructs that we have developed as human beings to deal with like paralyzing fear and terror. And this is like when I mentioned before that I almost studied psychology. This was the stuff that I was looking into. I
Mm.
was working with a guy named Sheldon Solomon, who you should also check out. There's some great documentaries and stuff out there about this. It's called terror management theory. But the
Huh.
whole theory is like there's so much in our life in our lives that we do from an individual perspective as well as a cultural perspective that are essentially facilitate our knowledge of our own extinction and our awareness of that. I mean, is very important because
Mhm.
we did experiments. The more conscious you are of your own mortality, the more likely you are to denigrate people and other groups from yourself. Things like that. So
That was
that,
awesome. You were ready for that.
yeah, dude, I went back to college. Like it's because I haven't read an actual book in the last like year, probably. So I had to go back to college. But anyway, it's a
That's
good
awesome.
book. There's good documentaries about that too if you don't want to read Ernest Becker. But yeah.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. Yeah, I usually read a little bit at night, but probably 90% of my reading happens through headphones nowadays
Yeah,
while I'm
me
walking
too.
or running. But
I listen to everything's audio these days, right?
yeah. But no, this was an awesome conversation. I learned a lot. Michael, thank you for being so generous with your time. And
Oh,
thank you,
my
everyone
pleasure.
who
Thank you everyone for
engaged.
joining.
Y'all have a good day.